that we try to do about every month or so, because we want to give support to family members, to extended family members, grandparents, aunts and uncles, even friends that you might have that are an important part of your family that want to learn more about this. So it's an opportunity or a place for them to be able to ask questions. So you're always welcome to invite your family and friends, extended family and friends, if they have questions. And secondly, and siblings too. Siblings are an important part of this process. We want to be able to answer their questions and address their issues. And very, very similarly, what I would like to say is it's also okay for you to ask questions about extended family or about your young children, or even pass on a question that somebody from your family or one of your children has asked you, and then I'll have an opportunity to ask it. If there is a child on tonight's broadcast attending live, please let me know the age of the person from where the question is coming. That helps me a little bit to kind of know my audience. If you're asking for a child, say a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old child, you can list that age, from a 10-year-old or 15-year-old sister or brother. So that's also very, very helpful. So like I said, I'm going to get into it toward the end of the broadcast. I'll give you a warning that there's an article or a question or a topic from the media recently about something that just happened, and it might be inappropriate for younger children. So I'll give you that pause and that time to either stop the webinar and listen to it later, or to ask your child to leave the room if you have a young child with them. In fact, if there are any young children on the broadcast tonight live, maybe just let us know the age of them. That can also be helpful for Andrea and for me when I'm speaking, because I'll try to speak to the level that the child is at. So let's get right into it. These are the questions that came into me from the report that I was talking to today. They were all about shame, and I think I'll read the questions, and I think the thinking that goes into it, I'm going to kind of address all of it at the same time. She asked the question, how would you define shame? How is shame used in a wrong way in relationship to raising children? Can shame be useful in helping kids develop a conscience or empathy? In other words, in helping kids feel bad about their misbehavior? If so, how? If not, why not? Have we lost sight of how feeling ashamed about doing the wrong thing can be a positive part of developing a sense of right and wrong in our kids? And finally, how can parents help their children who feel ashamed by their wrong behavior to not become mired in shame? I think the underpinning of this is this idea that there's healthy shame. And my answer is, I think of shame as in itself not helpful at all. Sometimes it does lead to behavior that looks moral, but essentially shame is a sense or a feeling of one's badness, right? One's lack of acceptability, of worthiness. And that the impulse that, excuse me, the impulse beneath the shame is to hide, to run away, to ignore, to deny. And so to the extent that we have shame, it leads to an inauthentic self, a non-transparent self. And so shame in and of itself is inherently not helpful, not part of healthy living and healthy parenting. We all do some of it, right? We do it inadvertently. My wife has shared with me about sometimes my tone of voice is shaming, sometimes even the question of why, asking our children, why did you do that, when the implied message in there is, why did you do that, you idiot, right? My wife says, Brad, you could just add on the end of your question the phrase, you idiot, because that's what it sounds like you're saying. So it's unintentional, and it happens a lot of the time. But when we're thinking in terms of ideals, it's not ideal. And I'm going to talk about morality and development and having a conscience in just a second. And I really do think about shame and guilt on the same continuum. One basic adage in the literature and with lay people is, guilt is feeling bad for what you do, and shame is feeling bad for who you are. Many, even therapists, distinguish them in that way. And I think about it much differently. I think about them as kind of on one continuum, and guilt, of course, being at the more mild end of the continuum in general, and shame being at the more severe end in general. And shame is more fundamental. But the fact of the matter is that guilt and shame are not a reliable source of morality. They don't point us consistently in the direction of higher morals and in what we would call a conscience. And the example that I use that I think everybody can relate to is when I've asked parents over the years why they have or haven't done something, when they said to me, I know what the right thing to do in this situation or in that situation was, but I didn't do it. And I asked them, invariably, I asked them, why didn't you do it then? Why didn't you do what you knew was right then? And so often the answer is guilt, right? People feel guilty for doing the right thing because we measure ourselves so much by other people's reactions, opinions, and feelings, right? And as small children, we're taught that when our parents are happy, we're doing well, we're good. When our parents are upset in some way, angry, frustrated, disappointed, that we are bad in some way. And we can also all think of examples where a child clearly ought not to care what the parent thinks, right? Even as an adult, thinking about it like, should I choose a career based on what my parents want? Should I have a certain religious affiliation based on what my parents want? And it breaks their heart if I'm not that. We all know logically that that's not a healthy way to live life. But the guilt that we have is so clearly tied to these kinds of decisions that we really do lose our true north, right? We lose our rudder when we think about guilt and shame as something that can guide us toward morality. And then a lot of people ask the question, well, if guilt and shame aren't a source of morality, then we would all become hedonistic, right? Selfish and self-centered. So why would we do anything right? And my answer is clearly love. Love is why we do the right thing. And the most important thing that we can develop in our children is the ability for them to feel. And in order for us to foster and encourage their ability to feel, then what happens is we have to see them, right? We have to be patient with them. We have to have compassion. And when they do something quote unquote wrong, what we look at is, yes, you hurt somebody, yes, you did something that was harmful to somebody else, but where are you hurting? And when we can provide that adequate container, the place where children are allowed to feel, and they learn to feel their feelings because their self, their authentic self, was seen and held and nurtured, then they learn to recognize feelings in others. And then they develop compassion and morality. So when you think about the greatest leaders, enlightened leaders in any era, and that have ever walked on earth, and I even use the fictional character Yoda, when you think about them, they weren't motivated by shame, right? They weren't motivated, they were motivated by love, by compassion, right? They wanted to give their gift. They wanted to give kindness to other people. And they had a developed sense of self enough that they weren't willing to compromise that in the service of others, right? They could take care of themselves at the same time. They weren't going to compromise fundamental values or beliefs to support somebody else, right? That idea of codependency where we have to compromise, sacrifice ourselves in the process of loving other people. So they had those qualities. So, I answered all of her questions and we talked about it, and I basically said it, saying that there's such a thing as healthy shame, in my way of thinking, is like saying there's healthy cancer, right? To the extent that you have it, it's unhealthy. And I think the biggest temptation with shame is that it works to change behavior. And that's why it is so tempting, so intoxicating for us to use that. I've even talked about that at work sometimes, that when I've asked or encouraged or given feedback to a group of employees or a set of employees about a certain thing, that the one thing that I know will work is shame, right? If I call them out in public, or if I write an email and copy several of them on it, or ask for some kind of accountability. So we have to be careful of using it because it works sometimes, but it really doesn't get to the heart of the matter. And so I wanted to share that with you today because I think it's a very common question. I have an entire chapter on shame in my book, and of course, a broadcast on shame too that you can also reference. So let me get to some of the pre-submitted questions, then I'll get to your live questions. First pre-submitted questions. I see my parents doing a lot of work and investing a lot of time and money in my brother's stay there. What happens if he comes home and nothing changes? What I say to families is, essentially, it's a thought experiment that I encourage for you to don't plan on him changing, right? Don't Don't rely on somebody else in the family. I say the same thing to the students and the clients in the field, by the way, about you all. Don't plan on them changing. So what are you going to do if they don't change, right? That's the essence of the kind of work that we encourage. Now, do we see changes? Yes. Is some of it go dormant afterwards? Sometimes yes. Are there various levels to which children grow in our program? Absolutely. But if you make a focus of your own reaction, your own boundaries, right? You're focusing on something you can control. And I tell parents this all the time. If you focus on what you can't control, you'll be less anxious and less depressed and discouraged. You'll feel empowered. And so while that's an interesting question, and we hope for the most amount of change, we encourage you to make absolutely your focus on your change. Ask about your relapse. You know, we have clients write a relapse prevention plan often. I think it would be helpful for parents to write a relapse prevention plan. And what does that even mean in parenting to relapse, to old ways of thinking, old ways of relating? And I'll say this because it's a little bit of a carrot, right? A little bit of a reward. And there's danger in focusing on this too much, but it's also the best way to encourage and support the change in your child, right? To make your life, your work, your recovery, if you will, your practice, your focus. You make the greatest, most potent contribution to your child's mental health and well-being and recovery when you focus on yours first. So I think that's a shift that I would encourage this sister to make, these parents to make, is to focus on that. And then you'll see ripple effects from that kind of change in behavior. With the colder weather, next question comes in. With the colder weather, how do you keep the students safe? First of all, we have protocols about when they are to be to a tent, when they are allowed to hike, and we not only have state protocols, state standards, but we exceed those state standards. And we make sure that they have quality gear, or if the weather becomes very extreme, which it hasn't this winter at all, then we can move them to a wall tent with a wood-burning stove, right, where they can seek shelter. So we can do that. So we have semi-permanent structures that we've placed out in our wilderness area that the clients can go to if it gets extreme. And we're paying attention to the weather all the time, so we see it coming. And their gear day to day is built for this kind of weather, right? Their sleeping bags are rated at 30 below and more, and it never comes anywhere close to that. And then the clothes that they wear on a daily basis are all at the highest quality. And then we check on them twice a day physically. Not just, we actually touch their feet and hands twice a day to make sure that they're getting good circulation, because those are the places that are going to be most at risk. We make sure that they're wearing sunscreen. We make sure that they're wearing things that protect their skin, because if the skin gets sunburned or dry, then it becomes compromised, and then it's at greater risk for energy, or excuse me, for exposure to the elements. So it's really a good part of the curriculum. It becomes a metaphor for self-care. It becomes a metaphor for the mentoring of the staff. And staff will say to me in the winter, like, how can we do all the therapeutic things that we want to do when the winter takes so much of our time keeping them, safe and warm? And my response is that becomes the therapy. That becomes the lattice, if you will, the structure on which you build the therapy. So thank you for that. Next question. What is the best way for me to communicate the hurt that my sister's actions have caused me and everyone else in the family? I think if you write a hopes and intentions letter, and you can look at those instructions that we've given your parents, you can also listen to the broadcast, the podcast, or the webinar on the hopes and intentions letter. I think you can see a format that works for you. A lot of times we have siblings who will write a letter and share that with them, share that perspective. And in many ways, for many clients and students, the sibling voice is a lot easier of one to hear for them. They can hear it a lot easier, right? There's not the power dynamic and so forth. And in some ways, you can ask your sister. You can ask her if she's open to it. You can ask her if she'd like to know. That kind of a dialogue also. But the hopes and intentions letter, the hopes and intentions assignment, yours will probably be a little bit smaller than your parents' will, shorter than your parents' letter was. But I think that's a good format to be able to write it. And we need to be careful with this kind of communication, because while we want to talk about how we feel and what happened for us in our experience, like with parenting, it's not a child's job for us to feel good, right? It's not their job to take care of that. So if your sister was hurting and then self-sabotaging and cutting or self-medicating, right? If she was angry and lashing out, as a clinical program, our work is to go inside and find out where was the wound, what's the wound inside. And so walking in the front door with look at how you affected everybody else isn't always the most effective thing. It needs to be spoken. Your feelings need a place to be heard, and sometimes that's a therapist or a parent. And sometimes, like I said, if the sister is ready for it, it can be in that kind of a letter or assignment. But it's not the primary mechanism, vehicle in therapy to help the children heal. I'm 17 years old. Next question comes in. I'm 17 years old. My brother is 15 years old, is currently out of Oak, and his therapist said I could come visit when my parents do. I was wondering what kinds of things I will do with my brother when I am there. Is there a sample schedule? Absolutely. In fact, I believe there's a sample schedule on our website. If he's a teen or a young adult, it has different sample schedules. And so on the left side of this slide here that I posted for those of you watching on the webinar, we have a typical day. Waking up, orientation, gathering around, morning group, eating breakfast, getting rid of the coals from the fire pit before because from the day before because we practice leave no trace. Another morning group, maybe a mindfulness activity, meditation, hiking, lunch. Each day we try to schedule in some personal time where they can work on therapy assignments or some of the hard skills, which is like making a spoon or making a Bojo fire set. Hiking in the afternoon, getting to camp and then setting up camp, chores, cooking, fire busting time again, fire building time again, dinner prep and eat, group therapy at night, and then oftentimes at the end of the day, if the group's in a good spot, we'll tell stories, read books that have some therapeutic value but that are also entertaining. Maybe music, somebody will play guitar or flute if they have an instrument out there, or also play games. So we want them to also every day have something fun too, so they realize that's an important part of life. Now, where that is your kind of basic standard, here are some things that also happen during the day. There are anywhere from a few to a dozen standing groups. Those are short 5 to 15-minute groups that anybody in the group can call to talk about a feeling, to problem solve, to work on communication, to get something off their chest. Individual sessions, both the therapist has them the 2 days that they are there, but also the staff have individual sessions with the client throughout the week also. Mandatory fun time. We get really into and really creative with games. Leading a group for a day might be something that one of the students is doing, so they're in charge of the schedule. Meditation, yoga, and mindfulness, we try to teach that to all the groups as often as we can. 2 days a week, specifically when the therapists are there, are layover days, sometimes more depending upon the weather or the needs of the group. Layovers are when we don't hike, so during those days they're getting new laundry out, they're taking showers or billy baths, they're getting new food, and they're having therapy sessions. During personal time, it can be some of the emotional curriculum, the hard skills, like I said, making a flute, making a pawaka bag to hold something in, or they can be reading or writing assignments for the therapist. And then there's academic curricula for the adolescents to work on so they can get some credit while they're here. It relates to all the therapy. Letters to and from home are something they can do during personal time. Solos happen every 5 or 6 weeks or so that ideally everybody has one solo where they're by themselves, and the staff come and check on them several times a day, but they're in their own little solo site, and they spend a couple of days or a few days just listening to themselves, just being mindful, seeing what they feel. It's not a time to work on a lot of assignments or fill your mind up, but it's a time for noble silence. Mentoring, they mentor the other students. Chores are part of it every day. The young adults at Entrada go to the Oasis. That's 2 yurts out in the middle of nowhere where there's lots of activities, where there's indoor showers, where there's cots and indoor cooking. And then everything becomes grist for the mill. So it's not like therapy happens separate from the daily activities. The daily activities become the therapy. The problem solving, the frustration tolerance, the sense of accomplishment that occurs, the delay of gratification, the communication and relationships, which quickly begin to mirror the relationships that I had at home with family and friends. We see those live, right, in the moment, and we're able to treat those there. So thank you for the question. And any of you that want to go back to that slide, or if you're listening to this in the podcast, you can go to our website and look under the typical schedule for the adolescents and typical schedule for the young adults. How do you determine, next question, how do you determine where the kids should go after their time in your program? For example, do you typically recommend going home, group homes, boarding school? It is our experience that most of the families, by the time they get to this point, would be best served by going to a therapeutic setting of some type afterwards. And it ranges on a continuum from transitional living to community-based programs to sober living to sometimes residential treatment, right? So lots of different kinds of niches. And basically what the Therapists Evoke works on from the minute that your son, your daughter, your brother or sister gets there is we're looking at what's the best setting, what's the best setting for success. I want to be as clear as I can because this is one of the oldest and most asked questions. In my heart, especially when I see how well kids do in the short time that they're with us, in my heart, I wanted when I started this to send all kids home. But I've learned through 23 years of experience, and I share that in the training with our therapists, that our experience tells us that the best recipe for success for everybody often is to go to some setting afterwards, to go to maintain the gains, to reintroduce school, to reintroduce other temptations, a bigger peer group. You know, wilderness is a very, very small box. And in some ways, I'll be clear, it's one of the easiest places to be successful your child will ever experience, in some ways. And so when we move them to the next school, when you move them to the next school or the next setting, you're expanding the box size, if you will. You know, they're going from juggling 3 balls, which they juggle very well by the end of their stay at Evoke, to juggling 5 balls. And if I handed you 2 balls, and you could juggle 3, any of you who know how to juggle, I do know how to juggle 3, I can't juggle 5. Does that mean I can't juggle anymore? Absolutely not. But it means that I have now more to deal with. And that's what these kinds of places can do for you on the continuum, on the transitioning home afterwards. So my intuitive feeling coming into this was what most or all kids should go home. My pragmatic, practical, on-the-ground experience tells me that that's not the best option for most of our students, most of our clients. How does living in the wilderness add to their therapy? You know, I think it's kind of a vulnerable thing to live outside. I had somebody that just went through one of our trainings, and what she told me was, what she told us was, we offered her the job after the training as a field guide, and she said she didn't feel experienced enough, resilient enough physically to do the job. And she said the other people there had a lot more wilderness experience. She came more from the psychology side of things, right, from that kind of training. And I thought about that feedback and her denying the job, not taking the job. And basically what she was saying, if I'm going to be spending all of my time worrying about staying warm, worrying about just taking care of myself, I'm going to have a difficult time being there for the clients. So what that leads me to is this. It's a raw, vulnerable time. You can't hide very well in it, right? The primitive nomadic model that we use at Evoke exposes you, right, who you are. It's not comfortable. Everything takes intention, right? Staying clean, staying dry, staying hydrated takes intention. Where at home or in a residential setting, most of that stuff we take for granted. So you bring it back to the most basic elements, and it teaches all the lessons that we need to learn about life in that context. And so you're not walking in the front door saying, I'm a therapist, let's have a sit-down talk session. You're kind of coming in sideways through the back door and saying, let's make a Bojo fire because we need it for dinner tonight. Or let's have you guys clean up the campsite. And then it's in the context of that all of the lessons, all of the discussions come out. And that the children themselves, that their coping strategies or their inability to cope shows up. So thank you for that question. Next question. What should I tell my family and friends about my child's time at Evoke? I want to respect his privacy, but I also don't want to lie. This is a tough question because there are competing needs here. I'll say a few things. I don't think you need to not say anything. I think you can have a discussion with your child about it. Sometimes they'll give you permission, but you can have a discussion. But I think sometimes parents have some shame or embarrassment about the process and they kind of project that onto the kid. You know, I've had clients many say over the years, like, I don't want to tell anybody where she is or where he is because I don't want them to come back with a stain or a stigma associated with them. And part of my thought is, but there's no shame in it, right? Like it's your child is struggling and going to get help, and that takes courage and strength and bravery by them and by you. And so I think having a discussion with your child is fine. I think you can be vague with people, right? He's away working on some stuff. You know, he's away working on some leadership stuff or some stuff that he was struggling with, right? You can be very vague about it without being specific. You have that right. And for some parents, they're dealing with so much that to take on the challenge that it would be to deal with the judgments of others can be overwhelming. I will tell you, by and large, the majority of the people that I know that have made the decision to share some of the details with their circle, right, have received a lot of support, and people sharing similar stories with them. We struggle too with depression. Everybody we know knows somebody, loves somebody that has or is struggling with mental health issues or addiction. It's just true. Everybody has somebody that they love. And so you get to do what you want. I think having a discussion with your child, seeing where they're at is helpful. Don't assume that it's shameful inherently, because it's not. And I can just tell you, in my own family, in my own life, you all hear me talk about going to therapy all the time. And sometimes I lose connection or contact with that part of society that still judges it. I have people tell me, gosh, you're really open. And I don't experience it as courageous because it's just a part of life. I actually, when I meet a therapist that's not in therapy, I really worry about them. I really worry that they don't really know how to do their job, or else they would be getting help and support. And the best therapists I know are in therapy and get supervision too, even long after they're licensed. Right? That's a part, in my way of viewing it, a part of a healthy practice. So all I know about somebody, if they're going to therapy or if they're in a therapeutic program, all I know, if that's all I know about them, the only thing I know about them is that they're trying. They're trying to work on something themselves. They're trying to help their child. They feel stuck. And so I would kind of encourage you to look at your own shame around it and have a discussion with them. Try to separate those two things out. And then if you need to, you can be as vague as you'd like without being dishonest, but not being specific at all. Next question. With our son away at treatment, his brother's at home and not interested in talking about him or getting updates on how he is doing. Any advice on how to support him or to get him to open up? I think mostly I would support him by granting him that to begin with, right? Granting him that space, even acknowledging. See, for siblings, what happens is that stuff happens in the home that they don't have control over. That oftentimes their peer who comes to a vote was so disruptive, there was so much anger and arguing or problems in the family, and it was outside of their control, which is trauma by definition. And one of the things that they do when the child goes away is they're taking back control. So in a way, I would honor this response, this feeling. I might even name it and say it makes sense and I get it. And name it in the way that I just named it, like you deserve the right to take care of yourself. At some point, you may gently nudge or encourage as you get farther along and your child gets closer to coming home. You can invite any of your children into family therapy. And remember, I think the most effective way to get a child who might benefit from therapy, like the one you're describing here, to come to therapy is just come for your help. Like, I need you to come because I need to work on it. I need to know how to support you. And allow yourself to be the focus, a good deal of the focus on the session. And a good family therapist will do that. And a good family therapist will also always access the family through the most resilient and capable and grounded members, which ideally would be the parents, right? So you're going to be on the hot seat, if you will, first. Your challenge in supporting and dealing with your child, that's going to be the issue. Not getting him to open up, but actually, how do you deal with it? Why is it your need? Is it, what's your need and what's his need? Where's he coming from? Can you understand him a little bit more instead of trying to get him to open up? I always say, We don't get people to open up by using a crowbar, right? Prying them open. We get people to open up by ourselves first being vulnerable and presenting ourselves as a non-threat to the person. And then they start to trust us. So thank you for that question. Oh, so I'm going to pause right now. If there are any young children in, you can, you may want to excuse them or invite them into another room. It's not a radical topic, but I just thought, probably anybody under the age of 18, you might invite them to leave. If you want to just close down the webinar, the broadcast yourself, then you can close that down and then bring it back. Listen to it later. But actually, there's some live questions that came in. I'm going to answer those first before I go to that other topic. So you have a few minutes. I'm going to answer some of the live questions. I have another question that just came in about the various 12-step programs that we recommend. They all refer to a higher power or God. How can we as atheists benefit from these programs? I got this question. I really like it because I think it's really honest, and a lot of people have it, and it can be off-putting if that's the dialogue, if that's the rhetoric that's there, and it doesn't resonate with you. Absolutely, I can absolutely understand that. And so what I mean by the 12-step programs that we recommend that you go to 6 of them, we want you to be exposed by them, exposed to them, not by them, exposed to them. Right? We want you to have some exposure to them. We want you to be informed by them. I don't attend Al-Anon or Coda regularly. I don't. But I'm absolutely informed by them. I use my therapist as my kind of recovery person in my life to help with my recovery from being human. But I'm informed by my 12-step exposure from the meetings I have attended and from the work that I have done there. And what I said to this parent is, I would just go there to see what you can take away from it. Not everything at a meeting is gold. Right? Not everything in a meeting is worthwhile. But what can you take away? How are these people, taking away some truth, some wisdom from their experience? And what I'd say is just, you can also just insert the word universe for God or higher power, right? It's just the way life is, the way the world and the universe works, right? This is what it is. This is what it presents with. This is how it works. Instead of, you don't have the belief that there's some all-powerful creator or somebody overseeing everything that's kind of taking care of it, managing it, or intervening in it. So it's just the way that it is. In Buddhism, it's called radical acceptance. In Christianity and Judaism and Islam, it's God, right? It's faith. And in Buddhism, it's radical acceptance. It is what it is. So I think about it more in terms of I think about when I go there, I think about it more in terms of it's just the way the world works. And the fact that they have a specific name for a higher power or God their version of God doesn't affect me because I can just translate it into my own language. That's what I would say. And we want you to have some exposure to it. And for some of you, it will resonate like crazy. And it'll be a place that you can go. I like it too because it's free, right? There's not a lot in this work that's free, but it's free. Next question. My son has been in treatment for over 2 years at Evoke, a residential treatment center, now a boarding school for children with similar paths. He's made lots of progress, but recently engaged in some behavior that is against the rules at his school. The school confronted him about the behavior, which he partially admitted to. He confided in me that there was more to what happened, and that he was proud of himself for being transparent. But that he was proud of himself for being transparent. I don't understand how he can think he was transparent when he only admitted to the behavior after he was confronted, and he didn't reveal the entire truth. Like a lot of things, that when I'm talking to parents, I think you're right. I think you're spot on. And I have 2 thoughts that come to mind. One is kind of rewarding a successive approximations, right? This is a step, a small example of something towards a larger truth, towards a larger awareness in him. And so just rewarding that. But I think to be careful about confronting it, right? To be careful about calling him on it or challenging him on it. I just would say be careful about that. And if you have or are tempted to or start to go down the road being incredibly sensitive to how he responds, because if he shuts down again, you've lost something in that. But you can use some of the examples that I use in my latest blog, where you say, or in the eight tools webinar or podcast or blog, where I say, here's my thought, or what if, or have you thought about this, or in my experience, like you can do some of those things. But I suspect he's going to be defended, and the defense is not going to go away just because you shine a light on it. It's likely to be more fortified. And in the long run, kind of holding that kind of space for him, I think he'll be more and more open with you and more honest. The ideal is to be an adequate container. I've told you all the story of my son when he came to me saying he lied on a job application. And I could just feel the bait, right? I could feel that he was testing me. And I had, luckily, the wherewithal to say that particular day, well, let me know how that turns out. I'll be interested. And then a week later, he came back and said, I told him the truth and they're not going to hire me. And I said, why'd you do that? And he said, my friend Josh told me I was being an idiot. So somebody could get away with confronting him, but not me. Me, the power struggle was there. And I knew, and I had a lecture about honesty and integrity and doing the hard thing now so that it's easier later instead of doing the easy thing now so it's harder later. And all of those speeches, reputation, all of it. But I also sensed that he was testing to see if I was going to be intrusive. And I gave him the space and he figured it out on his own. It's just a small data point of an example where sometimes doing less is actually doing more. I wasn't ignorant. I wasn't in denial. I wasn't sticking my head in the sand. I was just holding space a little bit different for him. And that was on the heels of many years of his life of me treating everything like it was a nail and I was a hammer. So it was an effortful and intentional switch for me to that way of thinking and being. A question from a 15-year-old. How will we know my brother returns if he's regressing or he has lost all that he's learned? I think that's a great question. I think, again, probably most important for the family to kind of be together and doing all of their own work. And for a 15-year-old, kind of figuring out how to respond to your brother, like, where can I set a boundary? Where can I walk out? How can I not get triggered by him or upset with him and fight with him? Find out the things that you can do differently than your brother. And so, they already feel like they're under a microscope, right? That they're in a fishbowl. They already feel like everybody's always evaluating them. And so do your best to take a step back from that, to not be so focused on his changing or not, but rather to be focused on, what do I do when my brother yells? What do I do when he fights? What do I do if he scares me or I feel unsafe around him, or whatever it is that you need to do, so whatever new techniques or skills you need. And if you focus on that, you'll find yourself being less anxious, and you'll find yourself you'll be an easier person for your brother to be around and admit that he's wrong or regressing. So it's kind of a complicated answer, but that's my best suggestion. And try to avoid, this is very important, try to avoid thinking and phrases like back to the way it was before, or we're back at square one, or nothing has changed. Those kinds of all or nothing statements are absolute triggers for most people. So do your best to try to stay away from that thinking, because even if some of the behavior returns, or all the behavior returns, he's not the same person. You can't go through this and not be changed by it. It can be dormant, like a tree in winter, right? The leaves fall off, the fruit falls off, it looks dead. It can be dormant for a while, but it's still in there, and it will provide him something later on if it goes dormant for a while. And he's probably going to test you and the family. Next comment or question. My wife is in an extremely unhealthy and dependent relationship with her parents. She refuses to acknowledge or address their incredibly destructive, corrosive influence. This compromises our ability to parent. I feel betrayed and hopeless. It's interesting. There's this idea. This Buddhist teacher was talking to my therapist. Maybe you've heard me share this anecdote before. And he said, in order to grow up, we need to kill our parents, metaphorically speaking, right? And my therapist responded to the Buddhist teacher and said, in order to grow up, we need to kill everybody at some points. And so it's a period of development for them. I imagine that the hooks and the strings that keep her in this relationship are so binding My therapist said something to me the other day that I thought was really cool. I posted it on my social media. She said, to fall in love with somebody is to fall in love with their dilemma with living, right? We fall in love. My wife, I can pretty easily describe the ways in which she is compromised. She can do the same for me. She's also a therapist, and she could do that with me. And so finding space to contain her too and to understand her woundedness is the kind of thing to develop. In other words, understanding why it would be so hard for her to do otherwise. That's the best thing you can do to support her. Again, I agree with your kind of assessment about what that kind of a dynamic does in a life. And it's also okay to take care of yourself. You know, in my marriage, we're allowed to not be around each other's family if we don't want to, if it feels too compromising. Right? We can take our own space. We don't have to be at everything if we don't want to. And there's no betrayal there. There's no abandonment there. It's just self-care. We're allowed to take care of ourselves, right? That's what we strive for in our marriage. I get to take care of myself. You get to take care of yourself. So I would also say that's an important aspect that can keep you less resentful and upset. If it compromises your parenting, you know, having couples therapy and talking about your difficulty, while also, like I said, showing compassion and impatience for what must be a terrifying thought for her to be able to separate or individuate from her parents. I do understand your betrayal and hopelessness. Can you speak of how to let go of the outcome of treatment? Well, I can speak to it all day. It's a lifelong practice, and it's not easy. It's you know, sometimes I think parents just need to get busy with their own stuff, with their jobs, their career, their education, you know, their hobbies, their interests, their charities, whatever it is, right? Fill up your life with those things in some way, especially as your children get older in the process. It's a hard thing to let go. It's a hard thing to let go of anything. You know, we want outcomes, and we didn't do this because we didn't want outcomes. So the best way I know to do it, first of all, be patient with yourself. You know, be around people that are patient with you with the letting go. Forgive yourself for not letting go, right? Try to be compassionate toward the difficulty of letting go. This is hard stuff. This is, you know, some of the stuff that we are all asked, that this process asks of all of us, is some of the most painful and heroic invitations that there is in life, that there are in life. So I would just show you compassion, and it's practice. It doesn't happen overnight. I can tell you in my own practice, in the past couple of decades, I'm much better at it than I was 10, 15 years ago. Because I teach this stuff every day, talk about it every day, and therefore I learn it every day, and therefore I try to practice it every day. And I'm better than I was, and I think it happens over a lot longer period of time than we think it does. The piece that I just wrote, the second to last blog that I just wrote on therapy and what to look for in therapy. Therapy is not problem solving. Is that idea that it takes a long time to heal the wounds of our childhood. It takes a long time to heal the trauma of our childhood and the trauma that we may have experienced at the hands of our child's behavior. And when we do, when that becomes our project and we're successful at it, in my experience, it takes years, many years. We move slowly through a very, very liberating process. So practice patience, forgiveness of self, and keep working. And be kind to yourself and how long this takes, because it doesn't go away with a book or some webinars or a few therapy sessions. It goes away with years of therapy, or it recedes, I should say, with years of therapy. Next comment question. We received our son's first letter after week 2 at Evoke. It left us both hope and skepticism. The words that we want to hear, and yet having 2 years of abuse, it's difficult to trust the sustainability and authenticity. Very wise. I'll say this. I encourage you to be very skeptical of any time he's trying to sell you on anything. When I go to therapy, I don't tell my therapist how well I'm doing and what I'm learning. I mean, I do sometimes. I'll share something I'm happy about or proud of myself that I did, right? That's a part of it. But I'm not trying to sell him that I'm evolved or figured something out, or tell her that I'm evolved or that I figured something out, or look how good I'm doing, right? I bring in my struggles. I bring in where the stupid things I still do, where I still fall down, where I still trip over myself, or I'm still struggling with a wound or a behavior 10, 15 years, all of my life. So I just ask parents to take a step back, to slow down, to just take. I mean, the attitude that I encourage you to say to take is illustrated in the tone and words of "we'll see, we'll see." Take your time. Watch what happens over weeks in the wilderness instead of what they say in their letters. When a child says to me they're cured, I don't believe them. When they say they're not cured, I don't believe them. Right? I take everything and I run it through my adult parent filter. And being skeptical is absolutely okay. I'm telling them that. Say, I don't know if I believe all of this. Like, it seems too easy. Sometimes one of the best ways to kind of encourage authenticity is to be unimpressed by their suggestions of improvement. You kind of like, you're on the sidelines and watching, but you're just kind of taking a we'll see attitude. Not a punitive attitude, not a disrespectful or a cruel or a name-calling or sarcastic attitude, but okay. And sometimes they get so mad at us, you, me, when they say, I'm not, what's going on? I'm doing all the right things. And I say, and you guys aren't being impressed and everybody's not believing me. And I say, it's not really about us believing you. If it's real for its own sake. If it's true, it's therapeutic progress is its own reward. And if you're paying too much attention to the audience, right, to the cheerleaders on the sidelines, to your parents sitting in the stand, you're losing focus from what this whole process is about, which is about you healing. So taking that kind of what I'll call a we'll see, take a step back, wait and see kind of attitude is what I would encourage. And it's okay to make some gentle suggestions that it seems a little bit too much and too quick, and that you're going to be skeptical. And you're not under any obligation to trust them on any certain timeline. Absolutely not. And you're not going to discourage their progress, and you're not going to send them into a tailspin. If your skepticism, based on your years of experience, sends them into a tailspin, then it wasn't very grounded in the first place, right? It was pretty tenuous, and probably it was demonstrated for your to be impressed. So it's okay to feel what you're feeling. Next question: how can I, a mentally and physically ill mother, deal with the pain of realizing how much I have harmed my now adult child as I raised him? Therapy, I assume, not shame, but that's so hard. It is. I mean, you said it, it's hard. I have this kind of question so often from people that I work with, and I'll say essentially what you said, which is, we all dent our children. We all dent our children, some more or some less, and some in different ways. And you may be on the more significant end of the denting of your child than maybe some others. So what are we going to do now? Going to beat you up over it? Going to put you in the guillotine and punish you for your abuse? Or are we going to try to help support you to see if you can be there for your child going forward? See if you can continue to heal the wounds. So what I would say is, if shame would motivate us toward that kind of process, I'd be all for it. It often doesn't. It often feels debilitating. And over the years, I've had so many parents think that the answer to the equation is to convince themselves that they're a good parent. That's not your case. And that doesn't work either. You're a human parent. And your child had the unfortunate luck of being born into a human family with human parents. And you came with your wounds that you earned honestly. And your mental health issues, whatever they are, and you earned them honestly. And then you brought those to your child. And that's true of all of us. So my thought is, I know it's hard. You're not alone. And over years, one can begin to look at oneself and one's own darkness and make peace with it, right? And get to a place where they say, I know I've done harm. I know I could have done better. And that's part of my own wounding. And I'm going to be patient with that. And that can develop over time for sure. It is hard though. Next question. My almost 17 has been at aftercare for almost a year. My daughter, who's almost 17, has been in aftercare for almost a year. One of the older brothers went through second nature footsteps and is now in college. He is supportive but not wanting to participate in the workshops offered by her school. My husband is going through the motions but not doing any real deep work. He's seeing a therapist but is still resistant. If we could get to a better place between the rest of us, there is in an all-girls school she could attend, she could attend high school, finish high school. There is a school that she could attend and finish high school. I feel frustrated at the prospect of yet another away program to finish high school. She has fully embraced her treatment. Yeah, I don't know if there's a question in there. Again, it's, when you're fighting the battle by yourself, it's going to be hard fought, right? It's like I say, you've got one hand tied behind your back, and you're being asked to contain lots of people, not just your daughter in treatment, but also your husband and your other children. And so you are especially taxed. Your capacity is being called on at an exceptional level, and so it takes more work. It takes more support. It takes more. That's why I like things like therapy and Al-Anon and so forth, is that you need that to take care of you. You need a place where you can go and be taken care of by them, and so that can be really, really helpful. Try to stay on your side of the street. Try to focus on what you can control. Try to manage and practice good self-care, and because your situation demands more resourcefulness, psychologically speaking, you have to do more than average. So I'm sorry that you have all that going on. What are some measurements we can use as we monitor our son's transition from evoke to aftercare? Measurements. Do you mean like research measurements? Like we have like the is that what you mean? Like tests, psychological testing, or something like that? I'll just tell you this, that the standard in our community, our wilderness therapy and therapy to community, is to use the OQ and the YOQ. YOQ is for young adults, and the OQ is for adolescents and their families. And they're a measure of progress and regression through treatment over time, and they've shown to be valid, even though you can take them several times. It was partially developed by my partner, Dr. Matt Hoy, during his PhD with some professors, and it's been a measure that we've used for the past 10 or 15 years, maybe more, maybe 20 years, to measure our clients and their progress. So that's something you can do if you want to look at that. Absolutely, if that's what you're talking about. And there's some, if you go to our website and you look at our research, our evidence-based, research-based, click on our website, you can look and learn more about the outcome questionnaire, the OQ, or the YLQ, the youth outcome questionnaire. I think I said those backwards. The YLQ is for adolescents and their families. The OQ is for adults. How do we know when things are on the right track or not? I think this is the same parent. It's a good question, but it's so complex that it's about developing new eyes and new ears. And so I know you want something more specific. I would say read or listen to the podcast or watch the webinar on the 8 tools for transforming relationships. For me, that's kind of the things that I've seen that have helped families be more effective over time. But it's developing another sense, another sensibility, a different sensibility than we have had, right? So, like, for example, how do I know if my family or if my children are doing well or not in different areas? It's everything. It's my own work. My answer is, and it might not be one that is well received, but do your own work. Right? The more you do your own work, the more clearly you'll see yourself, the more clearly will see your child, and the more clearly you will see your relationship to them and their issues. That's essentially the thesis of my book. That the question is really, the question that we need to be asking is, who am I? Who is my child? And what is my relationship to their issues? Right? That's the questions. And so the only way I know how to do that is in the kind of work that I'm suggesting. And I'm not giving you some kind of nebulous answer. Like, I'm not just answering vaguely and philosophically because I don't know the answer. That is the answer that I know. That really does make a difference. And I have testimony, not only my own experience, but testimony after testimony after testimony of hundreds, maybe thousands of parents who, when they've taken that course, have shared with me later on, it's true. I now can see things differently. I have new ears. I have new eyes with which to hear and see my children. And it's all about work on self. All right. I am going to go to that other question. So if you need to close down the webinar or the broadcast, or have your child, your younger child, step out of the room, I'm going to talk about. something that might be too sensitive for younger audiences. I don't know if you read this, but there was a young man in Newport Beach, California, near where I'm from, where I grew up, who took his own life last week. And he left 3 letters, one for his parents and one for family and friends, and then one for the school. And I wanted to read this to you because I got this information the same day that I was doing the broadcast reviewing Madeline Levine's book, The Price of Privilege. And it was almost a perfect case study in what Dr. Levine talks about. So this was one of the 3 letters that he left for family and friends. It says this: "Dear family and friends and whoever reads this, I really didn't want to come down to this, but it was something that I felt I had to do. Living in Newport Beach, you can also say the Upper West Side, Marin County, California, any affluent city in our country. Living in Newport Beach is like living in a bubble. So much pressure is put on kids to be good, and a lot of kids make mistakes. One slip up makes a kid feel like the smallest person in the world. You are looked at as a loser if you don't go to college or get a certain GPA or test score. All anyone talks about is how great they are or how great their kid is. It's all about how great I am. It's never about the other kid, the kid who maybe does not play a sport, have a 4.0 plus GPA, but displays great character. People don't understand how to be selfless. If failure happens, it's something like not going to college or not getting an A in class or on a test. Nobody seems to understand. They only see people on the outside. To me, the school of Corona Del Mar is not a public school. It's treated like a private school. So much pressure is placed on the students to do well that I couldn't do it anymore. There's never a moment to break. Finals have pressured me immensely, along with lots of other people. I want you to know that my parents were not the reason for this. My parents actually don't put almost any stress on me at all. It's purely the school. Nobody can understand what people might be going through. Be nice to everyone, and most importantly, be inclusive. If there is a kid out there who is alone, it never hurts to sit with them or ask them how they're doing. I never liked Corona Del Mar High School. The only thing that brought me joy in school life was playing baseball and football. Coach O'Shea and Coach Hedig, you have truly done something special at CDM. Don't stop. Keep winning championships and kicking ass. Coach Emmy, playing baseball gave me the most joy I've ever had. Baseball was a daily relaxing time where I could just get out and have fun with my friends. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. Live and play every day like it's your last, because you never know when you'll be done forever. Thanks to all for the memories." And the other letters, I read the other letters, although I didn't want to post them. There's a very similar message all the way around. I just wanted to bring up how powerfully I think our anxiety, not even our pressure, but our anxiety affects our children. And we all have some, right? We all have varying levels, and we all express it in different ways. But I want to say this: go make it your job to take care of your anxiety about how your child's going to turn out, right? Even children like yours who are struggling. That's why we go to Al-Anon and therapy, is so that we take care of our anxiety there, so we don't hand it to our children. Because what children need is to be seen, and to be seen, to be able to see somebody requires capacity. And this capacity is strangled when somebody is anxious or worried or upset at something, right? That's why as a therapist, it's a lot easier for me to hear your children talk about suicidality or cutting or self-medicating, and I don't get anxious, right? Because they're not my children. If my children share that, it's a lot harder to have the capacity to listen non-judgmentally, right? Because it's threatening to me. It's threatening the life of my child. And that threat is overwhelming for me. So, but I can work on that. I can work on being in a place where I'm a safe person for them to talk to. Where not only do I teach them that it's not about getting it right, but that I model it in the way that I react to them. Because when you react with fear or anxiety or worry, and you hand that to the child, by hand that I mean you demonstrate to the child, even tell the child that, it doesn't help. It's not what they need. And it feels like something's wrong with them, that they're bad. So that's the part we have control over as parents, as loved ones, as anybody. Of course, I think in our culture, for many of us, for many parents that I work with, it is going to be a battle to fight against your cultural expectations. You know, being proud of your child for being successful and putting that bumper sticker on the back. I made up these bumper stickers that said, "I'm proud of my child who's in recovery." Because that takes courage. That takes an amazing amount of bravery to be in recovery. And an A or an A plus or scholarships or rewards or being the coach or the captain of the team, that's just performance. And the child then begins to tie their sense of worth by their accomplishments. And we don't want them to do that. We want them to have the sense of self, right? That's our job, is to help them develop the sense of self. So I thought that letter and that story, that you could just Google it. His name is Pat Turner. And if you Google Pat Turner suicide, there's an article or two that has been written about it that talks about some of the challenges that we all have to face in our culture. All right, folks, I need to wrap up. We want you to attend 6 12-step support groups if you can while your child is with us. Start now. Just like I said, getting some exposure to it, becoming informed by it. It's not all going to resonate with you, but just kind of learn what the thinking is about, the psychology is about. Al-Anon, CODA, or Families Anonymous are all places that you can go. You can also go to NAMI.org for resource classes in your area that are affordable. All of these broadcasts are available on a podcast app on your iPhone or on an Android device. It's available through the SoundCloud app. Just search Evoke Therapy Programs. You can also listen to it on any computer by going to the SoundCloud.com website and searching Evoke Therapy Programs. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram for articles, pictures, inspirational stories there. You can search Evoke Therapy Programs on Facebook for announcements, stories, inspirational quotes, articles. And then the Second Nature Alumni Foundation on Facebook is a place that you can go to. It's an organization that helps people that can't afford therapy, helps people to get treatment. And then Evoke Therapy, our blog, new content every week. My book, The Journey of the Heroic Parent, is available on Amazon. Also, audio versions are available there too. The next workshop that we would like all families that possibly can come to it is February 17th at Entrada, 17th and 18th. Ask your therapist if the timing is right for a field visit, because oftentimes they can be paired up with a field visit to your child. Contact Gail at evoketherapy.com for more information. The next Finding You, if you want to do deeper work, small groups at our new Summit Lodge in Park City, Utah. Finding You is March 14th through 18th. You can ski on the front and the back end of that. March 14th through 18th, I also do private family intensives. And then our parent support groups upcoming. Los Angeles, New York City, Seattle, Portland, and coming soon, Connecticut, New Jersey, Toronto, and the Bay Area. I will be in Los Angeles area this coming Sunday, February 11th. It's 4 to 7 p.m. on a Sunday, so you can miss the traffic, and we can socialize sometime. And then I'll be back in New York on March 20th. We'll be having more dates announced coming up. And then our pursuits trips are high adventure trips for families and for young adults who want sober fun or therapy light or reconnection. So that's all for tonight. I hope this is helpful. Thank you so much for your participation and for your questions, and know that you are not alone on this journey. I am on it with you. I'm traveling it right beside you, and have the same kinds of challenges, same kinds of questions, same kinds of struggle and pain that many of you are experiencing. So thank you for being a part of this community. The next topic I'll announce soon. It will be this Wednesday, 7 p.m. Mountain Time. We'll get that out to you tomorrow with a new topic. Have a great couple of days, and I'll talk to you on Wednesday. Take care. Bye-bye.